Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. Full service has resumed on the TTC after a fluid spill forced the closure of Line 2 between Broadview and St. George stations. The stretch reopened in both directions around 7 tonight after being shut down for most of the day. Greg Ross has more on the commuter chaos.
Line 2 lower Danforth has no service both ways between St. George Station and Broadview Station.
That was the announcement many commuters were met with this morning on their way to work, forcing swarms of people to pack onto shuttle buses brought in by the TTC. Delays caused by the shutdown forced many to be late.
Very late because the TTC is blocked. It's very crazy.
I'm right on the edge of being late, so it's kind of frustrating.
That inconvenienced my day.
TTC spokesperson Stuart Green says this is all the result of a minor accident made by crews working on the tracks.
Sometime in the early morning hours, a work car that was being used to do some overnight work lost some fluid on the track. We thought it had been contained to between the running rails, and it turned out that some had actually landed on the rails itself.
The TTC says it was hydraulic fluid that spilled onto the tracks, creating a hazard for trains driving over it.
What it was doing was causing the trains that were coming into Yonge Station to sort of skid a bit. So the wheels would stop, but the train wouldn't quite stop. No different than a car trying to stop on ice.
Trains had to be turned around before reaching the affected areas, but that can only happen at certain stations.
What we were able to do was turn back trains at Broadview and St. George.
This is the third shutdown on Line 2 in less than a week. Just this past Wednesday, a track fire at Yonge Station halted trains during the morning commute. Then on Thursday, somebody threw a bike on the tracks at Victoria Park, stopping the trains again. This third shutdown had many commuters questioning the aging infrastructure here on Line 2.
Accidents happen, they're not all, the same cause, but this, for us, raises questions about whether the TTC is in a good state of repair, if it's being well maintained, and if it has enough funding to do that.
Green says while plans are in the works to upgrade the infrastructure on Line 2, these shutdowns don't appear to be the result of wear and tear on the system.
The causes are not the same, the locations are not the same.
The TTC is in the early stages of upgrading the signaling system on Line 2. The expected lifespan of trains running on that line is set to expire in 2026, and the city is still waiting for funding from the federal government to replace them.
The signaling system and the new cars go together. Right. So we need if we don't get the funding for the new cars now, that's going to have spillover effects.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario will need tens of thousands of new nurses and personal support workers by 2032. That's according to a government document obtained by the Canadian press through a Freedom of Information request. The government had initially tried to keep the numbers a secret. Our Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has this story.
The opposition accuses the government of trying to keep the coming healthcare staffing shortages a secret.
I think if you're trying to hide something, it's probably because you might be ashamed of it. Well, they should be ashamed.
According to the document released to the Canadian press, in 2022, the province needed 6,000 more nurses. That went up the following year and is expected to rise again this year, projected to hit more than 33,000 by 2032. For personal support workers, the document shows an even bigger shortage, projected to be more than 37,000 this year, almost 49,000 in 2027, then more than 50,000 in 2032.
It's alarming. We've been ringing the alarm bells for years. So it's not a surprise, but very disappointing that the government deliberately instructed them not to release those numbers. Shame on them for trying to keep this a secret from the public.
She says their numbers suggest the situation could be even worse, saying 45% of PSWs leave the profession in the first year. Another similar Freedom of Information request had already been made previously by Global News and denied. The government argued the information would harm the province's financial and economic interests, leading to unions using the numbers to argue for higher wages. The group Democracy Watch is uncomfortable with the government's argument.
That is just a gigantic loophole that could be abused again and again in many different situations.
All the opposition parties say people need more transparency from the government.
Apart from attrition being a major factor, this government is shrouding everything in secrecy.
The Minister of Health needs to stand up, do her job, be honest and transparent with people about the shortages the systems face, and put forward a plan to deal with it.
A spokesperson for the health minister says the province recognizes more needs to be done to attract and retain workers and is working on that. She points to an item from this year's budget with more than $700 million for enrollment and retention programs. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto remains one win away from advancing to the first ever Professional Women's Hockey League final. The team had a chance to sweep Minnesota tonight in the best-of-5 series, but lost 2-0 in Game 3 in St. Paul. Anam Khan is outside Peaches Sports Bar here in Toronto, where fans gathered for a watch party tonight. And Anam, not the result that fans wanted, but they're still hopeful.
Oh, absolutely, Kelda. Toronto has been killing it this season and in the playoffs. We've already beat Minnesota twice. Now we're going to Game 4. And now these fans have been speaking about the skill and incredible game of these women. And honestly, we've come farther than a certain other hockey team this year. They score! Toronto may have lost Monday's game, but their playoff run has already proven to be very impressive.
I don't think there's any stopping them now, so they're just playing incredible hockey.
PWHL Toronto lost against Minnesota in the rivals' hometown. But with 2 wins already in the bag, they have 2 more chances to advance to the final. For fans at the watch party tonight, it was about showcasing support for the team in its inaugural season. The city's Peaches Sports Bar that has been showing every PWHL game this year.
At the very beginning, it was more so just we're excited to be able to watch competitive hockey, competitive women's hockey. But now to see that Toronto is really, really good, has a chance to win the championship, we're very excited.
PWHL even selling official merch on site, with 100% of the proceeds going to support the league.
We've had really long lineups throughout the year. We've been really packed. People are very excited to wait for an hour or 2 even at games.
Fans say the team has continuously proven itself to be a top contender.
There's a lot of depth from what I've seen so far. A lot of the players, I think a lot of the players have goals, right? It's not just a concentration of goals from certain players.
The team finished in first place in the regular season in the 6-team league, which gave them the power to choose their opponent in the playoffs. In February, it sold out Scotiabank Arena for the first time. The perception of this sport shifting hits different for this former Olympic hockey player.
It's emotional. I mean, I wish this would have happened maybe 10 years ago.
She says she's happy to be able to be a part of this legacy, proud of the women on the ice.
They're household names now. You know, there used to be 1 or 2 players like Hayley Wickenheiser that you would recognize, or Jana Hefford, or Vicky Sonaher, Cassie Campbell. But now it's a lot of the players, and it's because they're being seen on TV all the time, and that's what we needed.
Now, the next game will be on Wednesday, also in Minnesota. And if Toronto wins that game, they'll advance to the first ever PWHL final. And that is huge, Kelda.
Absolutely. Okay, go Toronto. We'll be watching on Wednesday. Thanks so much, Anna. The Canadian Olympic and Paralympic swimming trials kicked off today in Toronto, with more than 850 athletes looking to earn a spot on Team Canada in Paris this summer.
It's a monstrous lead for McIntosh. She's going to come home to win the Canadian Olympic spot without a question.
All eyes on teen swimming sensation Summer McIntosh tonight. The 17-year-old Toronto native set the tone for the week-long competition with a dominating performance in the women's 400-meter freestyle. This will be McIntosh's second Olympic Games, and she's favored to win a number of medals. And it was a stunning start for Surrey, BC Sebastian Massaby. His time of 38.68 seconds in the S4 50-meter butterfly bettered his own para-world record set just a month ago. The swimming trials run through to Sunday at the Pan Am Sports Center. Welcome back. The trial of Dallas Lee continues this week. The 23-year-old is charged with killing and dismembering his mother in their Leslieville condo 2 years ago. He took the stand in his own defense last week. Today, the jury heard from a psychiatrist who assessed Lee on several occasions. Tyler Cheese has more on the testimony.
In the first 2 weeks of his trial, Dallas Lee's lawyers have argued that he was emotionally and physically abused by his mother for most of his life. Now, outside of his own testimony, the main supporting evidence for that are 2 reports written by a psychiatrist who met with Lee and interviewed him on 3 separate occasions. Dr. Mitesh Patel, called forward by the defense, told the jury he believes Lee exhibited signs of post-traumatic stress disorder before the night of March 27, 2022, when he killed his mother. He says Lee exhibited PTSD symptoms, including distressing memories, nightmares, and flashbacks. Patel also noticed Lee had shown avoidant tendencies, like not wanting to go home and interact with his mother. Patel says the symptoms he observed are likely a result of the abuse he suffered, as told to him by Lee. He also says Lee suffers from depression. He told the court these diagnoses, PTSD in particular, could have played a role in Lee's actions that night. On March 28, 2022, Toronto police were called when a passerby discovered a body in a garbage bag along Eastern Avenue west of Leslie Street. Investigators later identified the remains as the body of 46-year-old Tien Lee. Her son was arrested a few days later. He pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder at the start of the trial. The Crown repeatedly asked Patel about inconsistencies between Lee's testimony last week and the details he provided during the psychiatric interviews. But throughout, Patel maintains that minor discrepancies in memory are common in people experiencing PTSD. During his testimony, Lee admitted to not being fully honest with Patel about the interaction that occurred with his mother because it was a difficult topic for him to speak about. When the Crown asked the psychiatrist about this, Patel explained that Lee clarified those details in their most recent interview. Patel also confirmed for the Crown that most of the information about Lee's relationship with his mother came from Lee himself. But he also noted police interviews with Lee's friends and employees of his mother's nail salon that made reference to a difficult, potentially abusive relationship between the two. Patel told the Crown that he did not have any major concerns about the differences in Lee's testimony, saying his questioning of Lee was not the same as a cross-examination in court and would therefore lead to a difference in some answers. The trial continues Tuesday, with the Crown calling forward their own psychiatrist to offer her opinion on Lee's testimony. She's expected to challenge Patel's diagnoses. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
2 people were critically injured in a double shooting early this morning outside a NXX Nightclub. It happened just after 3:30 a.m. near Keele and Finch. Toronto police say they responded to reports of gunfire outside NXX Lounge. They say 2 victims were found with gunshot wounds. One was transported to hospital by paramedics. The other victim found their own way to hospital, both in critical condition. Police say a male suspect is still at large. Police are calling on the public to help them identify a young girl whose remains were found 2 years ago. Today, the OPP released an image of the child using technology called facial approximation, hoping it will lead to tips.
We don't want people to forget about this. It's been almost 2 years now, and it's important that this little girl's name, we can learn who she is, learn her story. That's what we want to do.
The girl's body was discovered on May 17, 2022 by 2 men fishing in Grand River near Dunnville. That's about 60 kilometers southeast of Hamilton. Investigators believe she was between 10.5 months and 3 years old. Using genetic testing, police determined the child's background is half Chinese or from neighboring countries along the southern Chinese border and also part North African. OPP are also hoping this documentary describing their investigation will help the public identify her. They're asking anyone with information to reach out to them or to Crime Stoppers, and they're offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the identity of the child. CBC News has learned more about the driver at the center of a deadly Wrongway Crash earlier this month. The cargo van driver was being pursued by police on Highway 401 after an alleged attempted LCBO robbery. The ensuing crash killed 4 people, including an infant. Thomas Daglick joins us now with more. And Thomas, you found out the driver wasn't legally allowed to be behind the wheel.
Yeah, not only was Gagandeep Singh out on bail facing multiple criminal charges, we have learned that one condition of his release was that he not be behind the wheel. Of course, he broke that condition by hitting the road after that alleged LCBO robbery in Bowmanville 2 weeks ago, right before he was pursued at high speed by police. Court records show the 21-year-old was charged in connection with LCBO thefts in January in Oakville and Burlington. In fact, the Oakville incident is described in court documents as a robbery that was carried out with violence. Then in February, Singh is alleged to have been in possession of a stolen vehicle. Again, he was granted bail the next day. 2 months later came this police pursuit and Wrongway Crash that killed 3-month-old Aditya Vivan from Ajax and the boy's 2 grandparents who were visiting from India. I spoke today with John Christie. He is a criminal lawyer whose firm represented Singh earlier this year. And despite everything that happened, everything we know now, Christie insists that granting him bail was appropriate. Listen.
the conditions under which Mr. Singh was required to live, he may have been breaking them, but they were appropriate conditions, and no further conditions are appropriate.
And there is a political dimension to all of this. Pierre Poilievre has blamed the Liberals' so-called catch and release laws. Today, the federal government responded to your question about that.
Yeah, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland highlighted the shocking nature of this whole tragedy. She was responding to our question while she was out in St. Thomas today. We asked her about the driver being out on bail after Pierre Poilievre recently blamed what he described as Justin Trudeau's catch and release laws for letting out a liquor store robber. Freeland dismissed Poilievre's criticism. Here she is speaking today.
I think it is really awful to try to score cheap partisan political points off of a family's grief. Our government has tightened bail laws, and that is the right thing to do.
Now, the Special Investigations Unit is still looking into that police pursuit and deadly crash on Highway 401 in Whitby. The investigation surely is going to take some time. The driver, of course, also died. He was due to appear in court tomorrow, Kelda.
All right, thanks so much for this, Thomas.
You're welcome.
A pro-Palestinian encampment at the University of Toronto is now into its second week. Organizers say they met with school administrators yesterday to discuss their demands. They say the university was more cooperative than expected, but stopped short of saying progress was made. Dale Manukduk has the latest.
The encampment at U of T has entered its 12th day and has nearly doubled in size since May 2nd. Protesters say they want the school to disclose all investments, divest from businesses that support Israel's military, and sever ties with academic institutions. On Sunday, students met with school administrators to discuss those demands. The students say the school offered them an ad hoc working group that would investigate divestment and make recommendations.
The senior administration, who is no doubt listening to this press conference, hello, we say bring us something real, bring us something concrete, bring us something immediate. We demand for disclosure, divestment, and for cutting ties with academic institutions in Israel today. The time has long passed for commitments to think about committing.
The organizers are now asking for more than they had originally wanted out of their third demand. Instead of cutting ties with Israeli academic institutions that operate in the West Bank or East Jerusalem, they want U of T to end its relationship with all academic institutions that support the military regardless of location.
We're asking for them to cut all ties. We're not asking for a complete severance of connections with all universities in Israel, just the ones that are physically located on illegal settlements or the ones that directly sustain this genocide.
Unsatisfied with the school's response, U of T alum made good on their promise to rip up their diplomas and end their relationship with the school. In a statement about the meeting, the university says, while we understand the public's interest, we are choosing not to share details at this time to enable dialogue. We are working hard to find a peaceful resolution. Meanwhile, there was at least one thing that demonstrators were happy to hear.
Was that the administration told us that they don't want the protest to end violently. And I quote, "We don't want this to end violently. We don't want to be Calgary. We don't want to be Edmonton. They want a peaceful resolution and an open dialogue."
The encampment demonstrators say they've provided the school with a June 30th deadline and that they've cleared their summer and fall schedules. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
And Colette, we were talking about the Northern Lights last week. I did try to catch them this weekend. I went up to the Markham Fairgrounds. I live around there. Unfortunately, weather conditions weren't that great. I wasn't able to see anything, but a lot of people did. I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, I'm jealous too because I wanted to see them as well, and I was headed off towards Kingston, but I didn't get lucky. But you know what? That's what social media is for, or for our wonderful viewers that send us images so we can live vicariously. And we do have some of those to show you here. We received some these are from David Willis, I believe, around Meaford. But I want to show you one in here, too, that looks like actually an angel in the sky. And the viewers made sure I knew that it has not been adjusted, or there it is in any way. And that comes to us from Brian and Hannah, and that was taken near Georgian Bay. Look at it. It does look like an angel. I mean, just some wonderful. So lots to celebrate over the weekend. Moms and also a beautiful light show. Maybe we'll get that coming our way again. The northern lights became the southern lights, right? Looking back on the daytime highs from today, you know, we have a frontal boundary where here the warm air is trying to push northward, cooler air southward, and it's along that we've had the thunderstorms firing up, and at times, yes, some of the active weather with watches and warnings and some of the stronger storms. As we go through the overnight hours, still some of those training along kind of that same boundary there. So through Goderich and Mount Forest, through the highlands, just sort of north of the city there, over towards Newmarket, Aurora, through that region, they do become weaker, but then even in tomorrow, a chance for more bubbling up. So it's not everywhere, not terribly widespread. It's unfortunate the same areas tend to kind of pick it up again and again, and that's where locally you'll get some very localized heavier rainfall amounts. We should pull out of it, at least through the GTA, mostly into Wednesday. Still some active weather there around the Niagara region. Temperatures overnight tonight, those are going to be on the mild side. Tomorrow, not as warm as today. We'll hit a high of 17. There'll be some sunny breaks in there as well. It's not all rain out. And then Wednesday up to 20. Thursday, Friday, not looking too bad. A few chances at showers coming back in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
$9.5 million is hard to picture for many of us, but here's how to fit that between your thumb and index finger. That is a vivid yellow diamond going under the hammer tomorrow in Geneva. Auction house Sotheby's estimates a Cartier brooch could fetch nearly $10 million. It's one of the largest diamonds in the world and weighs more than 100 carats. The all-knot diamond is believed to have been mined over 100 years ago in South Africa. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I will have your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. Have a great night, everyone.